Good morning. This is Alexandra Talleyrand for Abolition News Network in Florence, Italy, doing research on 19th century poetry. Today is April 30th, 1857. In particular, one poet born in England eloped to Italy to write more poems, many of which have to do with slavery. I am at the home of Robert and Elizabeth B. Browning to find out how much a poet is dedicated to their work. Welcome, Elizabeth Barrett Browning.
Thank you. Good morning. You may call me Elizabeth. My brothers and sisters call me Ba. I call myself EBB.
I'll call you Elizabeth. Ba seems too much like a small animal. I think our viewers would like to know when you decided that poetry was your calling.
Miss Talleyrand, I'd like to call you Alexandra, if I may. I hope I don't lose any blood while I'm talking to you. You see, I'm pretty much an invalid, a virtual recluse. I've had bronchial problems in my left lung since I was very young, but I have been passionate about poetry since I was 15. Excuse me. You see, Victorian women don't have formal schooling, and I read at home. By 16, I was reading Byron, Keats, and Wordsworth.
Elizabeth, it's time for your leech treatment for your blood.
Yes, Wilson, I nearly forgot. Alexandra, this is my personal nurse and housemaid. The air here in Florence is so bad in the summer, and I think my blood just soaks up all the filth out of the air. Oh, that's nice. That's why I don't go outdoors anymore.
Does that really help to have those dirty leeches suck up your blood?
Oh yes, they suck the dirt right out of my body. I feel so much better afterwards. Yuck. I'd rather have leeches than a clay poultice on the inflamed areas.
And what about you as a writer? When did you start?
By the age of 20, I decided that poetry was the most worthwhile work in the world because poetry was truth. And there is nothing more noble than expressing these essential universal truths. A good poet was one of God's singers, and to become one of this band of individuals was an ambition I am very proud not to conceal.
Well said. Now, you wrote some poems about slavery. As an English woman, secluded and sick, as you say, how did you know anything about slavery in America or the world to have any opinions?
Alexandra, my father owned sugar plantations in Jamaica. No child, however privileged or protected, could go without knowing about the daily savageries that went on daily on my father's plantations. Sugar cane was harvested by brutal beatings and floggings daily. 39 lashes with a thick cattle whip was the standard punishment for any misdemeanors. They would often force dog collars onto the slaves who tried to escape. An eerie blast on the conch shell signified the hunt for an escaped slave.
That's cruel. But I guess slaves produce results, right?
I don't think so. By the spring of 1832, rumors of a slave rebellion were growing daily. The complete abolition of slavery was reckoned to be only months away. My father, when he heard of this, he said they might as well sink the island of Jamaica. He would be finished.
Wow. Could he do anything about it?
Not really. Abolition is really only a matter of time. One of my 11 brothers and sisters, Sam, he went there, but he was taken in by the charms of the native women and died of a mysterious fever, probably succumbing to their evil influences.
All right. Let's get back to your poems on slavery.
My most ferocious one, I sent to an abolitionist magazine in Boston, the Liberty Bell, and it was printed in 1848. The poem was called The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point. It's rather long, 36 verses, so I'm going to tell you what it's about. It's told from the viewpoint of a runaway slave, and she is dying, standing where pilgrims first landed in search of liberty. She had fallen in love with another slave who was killed by overseers. She then was tied up, flogged, and forced into concubinage with a white man. She gave birth to a child who resembled him in color. She then strangled her baby out of hatred for the white man.
That's terrible. I'm sorry we don't have enough time to hear the entire 36 verses, but our listeners do get the idea of the plight of the slave.
If you think that's too much for you, I also wrote A Curse for a Nation, also printed in the Liberty Bell in 1848. In this poem, I declared about the consequences of slavery in America, which has developed into thunder and flames. I wrote, "On the writhing bond, slaves for this crime, this is the curse."
That's pretty incredible, taking on slavery in your poems. So let's go to something else. Have you had any interesting visitors here in Florence?
I invited the poet Tennyson, Keats, and Hans Christian Andersen. And 2 weeks ago, here in April, I had Harriet Beecher Stowe in my home. I adored Uncle Tom's Cabin, and I had an instant bond with her because she is a fervent believer in spiritualism. I call Uncle Tom's Cabin the most successful book printed by man or woman, and it has made her the best-known woman novelist in the English-speaking world. She even autographed my very own personal copy.
Oh. Elizabeth, I read one of your poems, The Image of God. In many of your poems, there is an intense love for God. I'd say with you, everything is religion. We thank God for your soul. I believe history will categorize you as one of the great feminine voices in the 19th century, if not all time. This is Alexandra Talleyrand for ANN saying good morning.